maximize the screen because it's easier to see. So what am I trying to say? Oh, if you have a question, just please let me know. Oh wait, I can still see your questions because I have my second computer. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. So a rational equation is an equation that contains at least one rational expression. Here are the steps to solve a rational expression equation. First thing we're going to do is factor the denominators to find the least common denominator. Then you're going to multiply all terms on both sides of the equation by the LCD to clear the denominators. Then you're going to divide out the common factors to clear the denominators. Then you're going to simplify. You're going to multiply and combine like terms. Then you're going to solve for the variable. You're going to check the solutions to make sure that they work, and then write the solutions that do work. Okay, this is a pretty lengthy process. I'll be honest with you, it's a lot. But once we clear the denominators, after I would say step 1 and 2 are probably the most difficult. Because after that, there's no more fractions to deal with. And I know that you all don't like dealing with fractions. All right, so first we are going to review how to find the LCD and what an LCD is. So an LCD, the definition, is a least common denominator. So an LCD contains all factors of each denominator. So what I recommend doing is everything that I write down, all the problems that I work out, I recommend writing down on your paper. The ones that I just talk through, don't worry about writing it down. This is a lot to write down in Desmos, so I suggest taking notes on your own paper. Okay, so when we're asked to find the LCD, I look at my denominators. So I'm going to list the factors of each denominator. So that means I need a factor. So looking at my first expression, x squared minus 2x minus 3. Since the leading coefficient is 1, I can find two numbers that multiply to give me negative 3 and add to give me negative 2. And those are my factors, x minus 3 and x plus 1. Looking at my second denominator, I can factor out a greatest common factor, which is x. Factor out the x, you get x times x minus 3. Okay, then you are going to start with x minus 3 and x plus 3 from the first denominator. So you're going to list the first denominator. Then you're going to look at the second denominator, and it has factors of x and x minus 3. Okay, since x is not already included in the first, you are going to include it. Since x minus 3 is already there, we do not write it again. So let's go ahead and find the LCD of these two. So since the leading coefficient is 1, I need to find two numbers that multiply to give me 15 and add to give me 8. If you are thinking 5 and 3, you are correct. So x plus 5 and x plus 3. Then I look at my second denominator. Since the leading coefficient is 1, I need to find two numbers that multiply to give me negative 3 and add to give me positive 2. Those two numbers are x plus 3, or 3 and negative 1. So unfortunately, factoring does not go away. Factoring is a skill that you need to know for all of Algebra 2 and the math classes you go to after. So now we are going to build the LCD. So I'm going to include all the factors from my first denominator. So I have x plus 5 and I have x plus 3. Then I look at my second denominator. X plus 3 is already listed, so I don't have to list it again. X minus 1 is not listed, so I have to include the x minus 1. And so that is my LCD. All right, questions on finding the LCD before we actually get into the notes for today. I think we learned this Unit 3 perhaps? No, Unit 4 perhaps? I forget. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and look at an example together. So example 5, I'll talk through it, and then we'll work example 6. So example 5, the first thing I have to do is find the LCD. So I look at my first denominator, it's 3. I look at my second denominator, x isn't already included, so I have to include the x. I look at my third denominator, x is already there, so I do not include it. Then I multiply everything by the LCD. Then you can divide out common factors. So 3 divided by 3, x divided by x, x divided by x. The nice thing is that clears the denominators so that you just have an equation left over. Then we multiply, then combine like terms, and solve the equation. It could be Algebra 1 stuff like this, or it could be Algebra 2 stuff like last unit. So we got x equals 6. Then you need to check the solutions into the original equation to make sure that they work. Okay, 1.3 equals 1.3. It works. Then you're going to only write the solutions that are validated or that check. Okay, you will want to circle your answer so you are communicating that you understand what the final answer is. Okay, so let's do one together. I recommend writing this down as I go through it. So the first thing we have to do is find the LCD. If you want to break apart 4a, that is the same as 2 times 2 times a. So my LCD, I first list my first denominator, which is a. Then I look at my second denominator. 2 is not already there from the first denominator. All right, the second 2 we also need to include because it's not there from the first. But the a is already there from the first denominator, so I do not include it. So my LCD is 4a. Okay. Then we're going to multiply every term by the LCD. So hopefully I have room here to write it all down. So 4a times 10 over a minus 4a times 2 equals 4a times 5 minus a over 4a. So multiplied every term by the LCD. Did step 1, did step 2. Now I'm on step 3 and I'm going to divide out common factors to clear the denominator. So a divided by a is 1. 4a divided by 4a is 1. So I have 4 times 10 minus 4a times 2 equals 5 minus a. Then I'm going to simplify by multiplying and combining like terms. So 4 times 10 is 40. Negative 4a times 2 is negative 8a equals 5 minus a. I'm going to move all of my like terms, so all my a's to one side, all my constants to the other. It doesn't matter what you choose to do. I'm going to move my a's to the right. So I'm going to add 8a to both sides. And that cancels out my 8a. And then I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So I have 35 equals 7a. I divide both sides by 7 and I get a equals 5. All right, we are not done yet. Before I check the answer, does anyone have any questions on the process? All right. Yeah.
I'm still a little confused on like the first part, like just getting the easiest part, like the least common denominator.
All right. So I'll go over that part again. Actually, let me check it first, finish it, and then I'll go back and talk about the LCD.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to check my answer by substituting in 5 for A on the left. So when I substitute in 5 for A, I get 0. Then I'm going to substitute in 5 for A on the right. So 5 minus 5 divided by 4 times 5, and I get 0. So 0 equals 0. That checks. Whoops, that's not X, it's A. So A equals 5. And that's our final answer. Okay, so going back to building the LCD. Okay, so my first denominator is A. My second denominator is 4A. And if we want, we could also just write it as 4 times A. So to build the LCD, I list the factors of my first denominator, which is A. Then I look at my second denominator. Is 4 already listed here? No, it's not. So I have to include the 4. Is A already listed? Yes. So I do not have to include it. So the LCD.
So like any other like plus 5 or something, you would have to list that.
If this was also times 5?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you look at that. So if the LCD is like 20A instead of 4A, so it's 4 times A times 5, you would look here. 5 is not already included from the first denominator, so you have to include it. And that's why I color coded them, because you always look at the first denominator. But we're going to do like 3 or 4 more examples where we find the LCD. So hopefully by the end it'll stick. If not, I'm happy to go over more examples with you.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right, I see another hand up.
Oh, I think this is what Daniel was talking about, but in the other example that we did, we had 3 LCDs. And so we just found the LCD, but I was just confused. If you were to have more than one, and you couldn't just multiply it, how would you multiply? Like when we did 4 times A, you could easily multiply that with the rest of the equation. But in our last problem, we had x plus 5, x plus 3, and x minus 1.
Yes.
So we just have to multiply the 5, the 3, and the negative 1 with the 3 x's.
No, because there's a plus sign in between. But the next example, I think, goes over what you're asking.
Okay.
All right. So if it doesn't go over what you're asking, then let me know. Yeah, because let's look at this next example. So where there's like expressions, not just like single terms. All right. So let's go ahead and find the LCD. So I cannot factor x minus 3. I cannot factor x plus 3, but I can factor x squared minus 9. X squared minus 9 is a difference of squares. So I'll write over here. If you remember, a squared minus b squared is a plus b times a minus b. So my a would be x and my b would be 3 because 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to factor this as x plus 3, x minus 3. All right, so let's go ahead and determine our LCD. Oh goodness, my pen is all of a sudden deciding not to work. Please work. That's so weird. It was working so good earlier. Okay, LCD. So we list the factors of our first denominator, which is x minus 3. Then we list the factors of our second denominator, which is x plus 3. Then we look at the factors of our third denominator. So x plus 3, is that already listed right here? Yes. So we do not write it. Then we look at x minus 3. Is x minus 3 already listed? Yes. So we do not include it because it's already represented. So my LCD is x minus 3 times x plus 3. Okay. Questions on the LCD? All right. So I'm going to start writing over here because this is a lot to write and I'm going to run out of room. So my LCD is going to be in green. So I'm going to multiply every term by the LCD. So I have x minus 3 times x plus 3 times x over x minus 3 plus x plus 3 times x minus 3 times x over x plus 3. Equals, so notice how I'm multiplying the LCD by every term. X plus 3, x minus 3. Oh my goodness, am I going to have enough room? Maybe. 2 over x plus 3. Oh goodness. X minus 3. Okay, that's kind of ugly. Let me see if I can fix that a little bit. I don't think so. I don't know why it likes to merge everything together. All right, so I multiplied everything by the LCD. Now I'm on step 3. I'm going to divide out common factors. So I have an x minus 3 and an x minus 3. So they divide out. I have an x plus 3 and an x plus 3. I have an x plus 3 and x plus 3, and x minus 3 and x minus 3. So from my first expression, I have x plus 3 times x. Right here, x plus 3 and x. From my second expression, I have x minus 3 and x. So plus x minus 3 times x equals, and then my third one, I just have the 2. Okay, if it helps and visually it makes more sense to draw one big dividing line to connect it all, you can do that so that you see it as one expression. All right, now I'm going to simplify by distributing, multiplying, and combining like terms. So x times x is x squared. X times 3 is 3x. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x equals 2. So on the left-hand side, I have a positive 3x and a negative 3x. When we add those together, we get 0. Now when I have x squared plus x squared, that would leave me with 2x squared. So 2x squared equals 2. So I have an x squared term, so we have to think back to what we learned last unit. So we could use the quadratic formula, or we could solve by taking the square root. I'm going to choose solve by taking the square root because it's much faster. So when we solve by taking the square root, we have to isolate the x squared. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And I get x squared equals 1. Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus and the minus, so x equals plus or minus 1. So we have to check x equals 1, and we have to check x equals negative 1. Before we check our answers, does anyone have any questions? Okay, this stuff is just going to require practice because it's a lot. All right, so thank goodness for calculators. Let's go ahead. Let's first test 1. So everywhere I see an x on the left-hand side, I'm going to substitute it in with a 1. All right, so the left-hand side, when I substitute in a 1, I get negative 0.25. The right-hand side, when I substitute in a 1, I get negative 0.25. So x equals 1, checks. Now let's try x equals negative 1. So negative 1, negative 1 minus, negative 1 minus 3 plus negative 1, negative 1 plus 3, and I get negative 2.5. Now for the right-hand side, 2 divided by, make sure that you're using parentheses when you substitute in, minus 9, and I get negative 0.25. So both of these answers check. So my solutions are x equals 1 and x equals negative 1. All right, questions on that example? All right, I have one more example for you guys. Oh, actually, this is one for you guys to try. And then, yep, and that's it. All right, so go ahead and try this one. You can complete on your own paper or in the text box provided or in the sketch pad. So go ahead and see if you can solve this problem. So factor the denominators, find the LCD, multiply all terms on both sides, so on and so forth. So in about a minute, let's make sure that we have the correct LCD. If we don't have the correct LCD, it's going to make everything a whole lot more difficult. So go ahead, take 1 minute until, let's see, 2:05, 2:06. Come up with your LCD, and then I'll confirm it. All right, LCD. What should I do first? Go ahead and feel free to share it out. Those are the factors of the denominators. So what should I write first? Anyone? What about 3 times x? That's the first denominator. All right, then let's look at actually, let me color code it. So my LCD, three times x. All right, let's look at the second denominator, 3. Is this 3 already listed? Yes, so I'm not going to include that one. Is there a second 3 already listed? No, so I have to include that second 3. Okay. Now looking at the third denominator, is there already an x listed? Yes, so I do not include the x. So my LCD is 9x. Whoa. All right, how'd you guys do with the LCD?
Wait, how did you get, is that another 3 at the end?
Yes.
Yeah, why can't you just put 9?
Because that would not be the least common denominator. So here are my factors of my denominator. So 3 times x, 3 times 3, and x. And if the rest of you already got the LCD, then continue on and solve. So my LCD, I'm going to list the factors of my first denominator, which are 3 times x. Then I'm going to look at my second denominator, this first 3. All right, that first 3 is represented right there. But what about the second 3? The second 3 is not represented, so I have to include the second 3. Then I move on to the last denominator, the x. The x is represented right here, so I do not include the x. So my LCD is 9x. And as you guys are working, I'll go ahead and work it on my end. So you just keep on working and I'll work it so you guys can check your work in a minute. If you are stuck on step 2, I have step 2 on the board or on the screen. Please ask questions if you are confused. All right, I went ahead and cleared the denominators.
Wouldn't that be a 3 times 8?
That would be a 3 times 8. Thank you for checking my work. Yep, thank you.
Wait, Miss, why'd you change the 9 to a 3?
Because both 9 and 3 are divisible by 3. Isn't 9 divided by 3 3?
Yeah.
Yep, so that's why. All right. So hopefully you have been working the problem as well on your paper. I have the entire thing worked out for you. Please let me know if you are confused on any part of it. For those of you who have completed it, go ahead and go to slide 8, read what's on slide 8, and we are done for today. So feel free to go if you have any, or if you are good. If you have questions, please stay and I can help you with the graded practice for today. Or I can go over any of these examples again. So we ended a few minutes early, which is always nice. But I would say definitely don't leave until you get this question correct. Um,